So it's getting on YouTube, Brother Abbas.
You okay? You didn't need the any code?
Yeah, it's already on YouTube.
I think he activated.
Oh, yeah, you didn't need the code?
Yeah, it's already on YouTube.
I think he activated.
Okay, so that's good. Why is there an echo?
That was probably me.
Ah, okay, gotcha.
I didn't realize I was on mute. I just shared the link to my Facebook page. So, but the link, the YouTube link didn't exist until the YouTube went live.
Yeah, it's always a new link whenever a new whenever you start anything on live. It's always a unique link.
Okay. Awesome. Is there anything we need to touch base on in terms of our flow before we go live?
Am I the only one not seeing the link somewhere?
If you go on YouTube, underneath the image, there's a down somewhere it will say share. And you can click share and it'll offer you the link to copy and paste. And also at 7, I'm gonna click publish on my post, or maybe a minute or two before 7.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, because I didn't see it on your post. I'm like, how did
No,
you share
I've got it written, but I haven't clicked post yet.
Okay.
In case we needed to talk about stuff and I wasn't sure if they could hear what we're saying already.
But it's already on YouTube is what you're saying.
It is
Yes.
on because it says 2 people watching, so it's probably me and Josh.
No, I turned mine off because the echo thing.
Okay, so I have somebody else watching because it says 2 people on.
Still don't see
Or
it.
it could be pulling me up. I don't know.
It is on because it says 2 people watching, so it's probably me and Josh.
And now I got on there as well.
The echo thing.
Okay, so I have somebody else watching because it says
There must be somebody listening in.
Or it could be pulling me up. I don't know. I mean, I've got the link on my Facebook profile, but I
Okay,
haven't
it
clicked
says
publish
program
yet.
begins shortly. Is that the right one?
No, it says Interfaith Dialogue.
I see.
Here, I can send you the link.
Profile, but I haven't
it
clicked
says
publish
program
yet.
begins shortly. Ah, yes, Interfaith Dialogue. I see that now.
No, it says Interfaith.
So,
For those of you that you're using YouTube as well, make sure to make the kind of microphone off
yes.
on the YouTube because it clears the echo.
Oh, okay. So if you've got YouTube open, you need to turn your volume down.
Yeah, make that off.
Mute the video. Yeah, that makes sense.
Well, I was saying, can you mute? We can hear you.
and it's different. It's delayed by a second or two.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Well, I was saying, can you mute? We can hear you.
And it's different. It's delayed by a second or two.
Oh, there's a lot of delay. Okay, I'm gonna go dark from the video. Do you guys need anything from me right now?
Can you share me did you get my message? Oh no.
Are you guys good?
Abbas, can you text me the link, please?
I sent it to you on chat, on this chat here.
Yeah, I need it on my phone. That's my problem.
Okay, I'll send it to your phone.
Thanks.
Yep. Are you guys
Abbas, can you text me the link, please?
So, okay, so that was coming through Abbas maybe. So Manaz, are you gonna go on mute as well?
Yeah, I'm gonna go on mute. Yeah.
Okay. So is there anything that has come up today that we need to make sure we touch base on?
I don't know if you guys can see me or hear me.
I can hear you, but your video is off.
Okay, I'm just trying to share the link. That's why.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm just using the phone. I'm not on the computer, and I don't know if that's the best idea.
I'm on my laptop just for so I can have access to my phone for the chat option. So I'm about to I'm clicking post on my Facebook post, and so you should be able to do it as well if you want to.
Okay.
But I think it might just redirect people to YouTube. I'm not sure.
That's what I believe it will do.
Just so you guys
But,
know, we're all being live right now. So there are people watching, FYI. Minaz, you could go dark, please, on video. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay. Well, we'll get started in a few minutes. How's everybody's day?
Pretty good.
Great.
What's the temperature in Ohio today?
I mean, cold. It was in the low 40s. Tonight, a low of 26.
Oh,
Yeah, chilly.
it's 96 degrees here. Just
Lovely.
not rubbing anything in, but
No,
you know.
it's all good.
So
But yeah. I see on Facebook that a lot of people are making good use of their pools these days. And
yeah, we I have some issues for people who have pools during this season, during the stay-at-home thing. Like, that would be nice.
yeah, pools are good.
Did I hear envy?
Yes, could you pray for me? Because I need it.
Sure.
Sheikh, are you going back and forth to Tampa still?
Not as often, only when there is an unfortunate event like a death or something, or a wedding. I mean, a marriage that is to be recited, or a death. Otherwise, I have not been going that often.
Okay, that cuts down on mileage, huh?
Yeah, for sure.
Well, this is kind of interesting because I can't tell. I have no idea who's watching. So that's a little, and we're still a couple minutes out from stated start time, so we want to make sure. I hear that there's 18 people and they can see us, so make sure that you wave. All 18 of you, we are so glad that you are watching already. You are early birds, and we appreciate that. And in just a few minutes, we're going to get more formally started, and we're excited.
They're not able to see you. They're seeing the poster.
Oh, well, that's even better.
So they can hear us.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So we wasted that wave. We waved, and there was.
We'll wave again.
We'll wave again. That's true.
Does the early bird get the worm work in Islam? Because it doesn't really work in Judaism because worms are not kosher. Are worms halal?
No.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we'll just give all the worms to Josh.
You are too kind.
Anything
like really too kind. Anything we can do.
Well, in Islam, I don't think the time has started. So in Islam, anything that is considered below the honoring of the mankind or of a human being is not permissible. So there are many things that are not permissible. Only what is considered to be pure, clean, honorable. So roaches, insects, all of these things are not obviously permissible, and many of the living beings that are unclean and so on. Although there are different schools that, just a disclaimer, there are other schools that differ.
I'm okay with giving up roaches. I don't judge people who prefer those, but that's not my thing. It's just
Well,
not my
now
thing.
I started judging them after this pandemic. Do I have the right to?
Sure, I don't know. Well, on that note, it is 7 o'clock, and so we are here. Awesome. Okay, there we go. Well, hello everybody watching through this live YouTube opportunity. We're so glad that you could join us for our Interfaith Dialogue this evening. We are friends who also happen to be clergy in our respective traditions. And so our goal in our time together is to talk about our faith traditions and talk about how our faith intersects with our understanding of this current season that we're in, this season of pandemic. And we may laugh a little bit in our time together because we enjoy spending time with each other, but we want to assure you that we certainly take this season very seriously. And if you are watching and going through a significant struggle in your own life, we do extend a great amount of compassion, empathy, and mercy to you. And we're so grateful that you're giving us your time tonight. So we're going to introduce ourselves, and I would like to start with Sheikh Al-Khaliq, if that would be okay.
Sure. Okay. For those of you who don't know me, greetings and salam. May God's blessings be upon all. My name is, the title is Sheikh, and my name is Mujtaba Al-Khaliq. I reside in Orlando currently, and I serve the wider community, but specifically Masjid al-Hayy mostly. I guess that suffices for the introduction. Anything else I'm missing?
I think you did splendidly. So,
thank you.
Rabbi Skolnick, would you like to go next?
Sure. The time pressure is now not on my side. The sheikh was so fast. I'm Rabbi Hillel Skolnick, originally from Queens, New York. I lived for 7 years in Orlando as the rabbi of the Southwest Orlando Jewish congregation, and currently serve as the senior rabbi of Congregation Tifereth Israel in Columbus, Ohio, which is where I am coming to all of you from this evening.
Welcome.
Well, thank you so much, Rabbi. And my name is Josh Bell, and I'm a United Methodist pastor here in Orlando, though I don't currently serve a local church. I work for the Community Hope Center located in Kissimmee, and we do poverty alleviation and services for folks who are experiencing homelessness and poverty. And so that's my primary position. I also work for Valencia College Peace and Justice Institute, and we facilitate dialogues around difficult but important topics like racism, privilege, bias, etc. And so it's my privilege to be kind of moderating tonight to give you a little bit of background about how this came about. We have had an interfaith dialogue together before this. A few years back, we got our respective congregations together for an informal luncheon. We've been involved in interfaith work together, the three of us, before this evening. And so when everything started to unfold around the current pandemic and the situation that we were all facing, actually Minaz Manakia, who's the outreach director for Masjid Al-High, reached out to me, and we started talking about having a conversation. And to be clear, that was like a week ago. And so this is not something that's been through months and months of planning. It's more of a let's get together and talk. So we're grateful for you giving us some of your time tonight. And we're grateful for the opportunity that we spend some time together. And so the format that we're going to be using tonight, we're going to start out taking turns, sharing about how our faith intersects with this question of where's God in the pandemic. And that's pretty broad, and we all may take slightly different angles on that. We just want to share from our respective faith traditions related to that. We're going to talk a little bit about the needs and opportunities that we see in our religious communities and also within our larger communities that we can look at and address. And then towards the end, we're also going to have some time for question and answer. So if you have some questions that you would like us to address, there's an email address that you'll send those to. So it's outreach, which is spelled like it sounds, outreach at masjidalhigh.org. So if you're on the YouTube channel, you can see how that's spelled. But it's Masjid Al-High, MasjidAlhayy.org. So we're very, very grateful for Masjid Al-High hosting us through their YouTube channel and their generosity and being part of this as well. So that's kind of our format. And as we get into more of our program here, I put the Sheikh on the spot last time. So I think it's the rabbi's turn. So Rabbi Hillel, would you share with us about your faith tradition and how it intersects with this present moment?
Sure. And first of all, it's wonderful to be with both of you and to be speaking to everyone who is watching. And I appreciate so much the opportunity to reconnect with both of you and to continue to foster the roots and to watch the fruit become part of our lives from the trees that we planted together a couple of years ago. It brings great meaning to me for this moment, and I appreciate so much the invitation. And I hope this will be another in an ongoing series of dialogues, private and public, that we can share together. The Sheikh mentioned at some point, I believe that it may have been before we started, that to say, I think it was actually before we started in a conversation about foods that are halal, how even in Islam, there are different traditions and different understandings and different thoughts. So it's worth noting that that is certainly true in Judaism as well. And to the extent that I speak for Jews across the world, when I say what Judaism says about the concept of suffering, it's completely not true that I speak for Judaism as a whole. I can speak for myself and for my understanding and my interpretation of our holy text and my understanding of Jewish tradition. But the old joke about putting 10 Jews in a room and getting 13 or 14 opinions is very much accurate. So I just want to put that out there. I speak for myself and don't pretend to speak for other people. I also am married to a rabbi, and she speaks extraordinarily well for herself too. Having said that, though, I think really it gets down to a concept of how do you view God's presence in the world? Because ultimately, I think that's one of the things that people are thinking about in this moment of, where is God in the pandemic? And you could take that question and say, where is God in any moment of suffering? And religions have both been subject to and been cause of suffering for as long as religion has been around. And so you can always say, where is God in these moments? And so whether it's pandemic or this or plague or atrocity or anything that you're talking about, you always have to say, where is God? And that gets back to the question of how do you see God in the universe? Does God constantly impose God's self, adjusting things, making changes, or being part of pushing people in one direction or another direction, the balance of fate versus the balance of free will? Or do you believe in a God that perhaps constructed the world, even created the world according to whatever your story of creation is, and then allows the world to mostly spin independently on its axis without giving up that omnipotence and that ability to change something here and there? That tends to be a bit more my conception of God's influence in the world, is the ability to make adjustments, and also the omniscience on God's part to know what all of our choices have the ability, both constructive and destructive, to do. The example that I often give in conversation with members of my own congregation and people in general is the example of if I forget to take my dry cleaning with me on any given morning, and then I turn around and go back. And so my whole day is 2 minutes later. Does that mean that God changed my fate? Or does that mean that I made a decision and then God understands how that changes the rest of my day? I'm 2 minutes behind schedule. So perhaps, and this is, an out there interpretation of it, but perhaps that 2 minutes saved me from a drunk driver who otherwise would have been in my path. Conversely, that 2 minutes could put me in the path of a drunk driver and then change the scope of my life, potentially end it. So I certainly believe for my own self, again, that God has the power to affect a course of a pandemic, to adjust the way that things spread, or give someone perhaps a moment of insight to find a cure even. So that's, I would say, part A, where is God in the world, or where is God in the pandemic? But I think God and God's presence and the concept of spirituality also plays an important part in times of pandemic, especially in this instance, as we have been asked, and hopefully people have answered the call to socially distance ourselves from one another. Because one of the ways that we continue to try to be together in community is in moments of spirituality and moments of compassion, and hopefully moments of kindness and graciousness and grace to each other. And there is certainly God in that as well. And for myself, and again, I see God every day in my children. And I see God in the people who are able to do such incredible things in the world. Even in these moments, I see God in the first responders and the people who are putting their lives on the line and exposing themselves to the coronavirus, not necessarily purposely, but sometimes just out of sheer necessity because of a lack of having the right equipment to properly protect themselves. And yet they go out there anyway and treat people who are sick. That to me is certainly a divine presence, even in this incredibly challenging moment.
Thank you for that. Thank you very much. That's I appreciate how you approach that and the different aspects there. Sheikh, would you like to share?
Should we go the other way around now?
You can turn it around on me if you want to.
If you like.
I'm sorry?
If you like, you can go ahead.
I would love to hear from you first.
Okay, no problem. Okay, in the name of the most merciful. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. The question that is, in fact, the topic is, where is God in the pandemic? Just to be clear, none of us, I presume, are by any means questioning his presence, rather trying to understand his presence. Otherwise, we all are people of faith, and we believe he is present at all moments. The way I want to address it, if you allow me, is by posing some questions that have been constantly coming to myself, and I'm sure to yourselves, and there have been questions from people from different groups of faith. One of the main questions is that what if it's man-made? I've been asked these questions. What if is it man-made in the first place? Or if it is man-made, is God still in control of it? Is it the result of man's actions? In some traditions, we are told that based on what we do, we have certain consequences. And in general, where did it come from in the first place? The very brief, and I've been given very short time, obviously, because we all need to give our perspective. In very brief terms, I want to say that wherever it came from and however it actually came, it's destiny. It has been destined by the Almighty God, and it is through His wisdom. Now, did it come through his initiation based on the what we call the legislative or formative level of the creation, in the sense that as he formed the world, he set certain rules, and the rabbi alluded to that, that he created the world in a certain way, and it just runs, and at times he may interfere with things, and we call these things miracles and so on. Nonetheless, is it based on certain actions of mankind, regardless of, and this is what I want to say in brief in this first aspect, is that regardless of where it came from and how it came, it is definitely allowed by the Almighty God. He allowed it, otherwise it would not have happened. Without His will, nothing happens, and therefore He has definitely allowed it to happen. Now, the next question would then come, and why then did it happen? Why did He allow it? And that would bring about the discussion on suffering, pain and suffering. And that is all sorts of sufferings that humans suffer, whether it be lack of wealth, poverty, hunger in some parts of the world, pandemics, diseases, malaria, or Ebola, or whatever it may be. All of these things that we see in the universe, why do they happen? Or in our world, why do they happen? Why does God allow pain and suffering? And that includes questions to do with His mercy, in terms of what people wondering. In fact, in the Holy Quran, the chapter that is mandatory on all Muslims to recite on a daily basis starts with the most significant, according to the narrations, the most significant part of the Quran, or ayah, as we call it in Arabic. It is not a verse. I try to avoid saying the verse because the Quran is ayat. Ayat means signs. It's one of the most significant signs of God. That is, He says in the name, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. I begin in the name of God, or I seek help from the name of God, the most merciful. Rahman ar-Rahim, two aspects of His mercy. Some say beneficent, merciful, whatever it may be, the most merciful. So we know that He is the most merciful. Where is His mercy? How do we explain His mercy in this occurrence? The first thing that I have to mention here is that before we move in trying to explain this, we have to acknowledge the hereafter. If we do not acknowledge that there is life after death, we will have a problem. We will not be able to explain many of the things that happen in this world: pain, suffering, problems, even marital issues. You know, people end up in troubled marriages, or troublesome relationships, and so on. Many of these things, they didn't decide. They were praying for good, they were hoping for good, things turn out bad, whether it's on a small scale or a big scale, or as big as a pandemic that we're going through. All of these things cannot be explained, and we cannot then justify the wisdom of God, or His mercy, or His justice, if we consider life to be here and only here. As soon as we consider the hereafter, then it's much easier to explain, because we understand that those who are, this world is a plane of testing. Some are tested with poverty, some are tested with wealth, some are tested with sickness, some are tested with well-being. And what happens in such situations, that many people are in fact suffering, and humanity at large is somehow suffering, either health-wise, individuals who are sick and we pray for their well-being, or people suffering as a result of that in terms of economic loss, losing their jobs, losing their houses, and so on. So there are a lot of things that are happening. All of these things are tests. This world is a trial. It's a place of trial. It's not the end. Once we understand that, then we understand that whatever God does, it is through his wisdom and through his mercy. He does it for us to get closer to him. He wants to give us more of his mercy. He wants to give us the best places in heaven. He wants his mercy to encompass us more and more. And when we deviate, he sometimes reminds us and brings us back to the path because it's best for us. And that brings about the third issue or question, my last issue, that people are often saying, you're saying it's a wake-up call, you're saying it's an opportunity to reflect, opportunity to think about his blessings that we've taken for granted all this time. Human society is one of the most beautiful blessings that God has blessed us with, and we have neglected, we have taken for granted. We cheat each other, we are not honest with each other, sometimes we are harming each other. That is all unappreciation of his blessings. And therefore, sometimes when we take his blessings for granted, he takes away some of his blessings to remind us. And this is a reminder. So some people ask me, well, what happens to those who die then? How is he waking them up? By killing them? Is that what you're suggesting, that you kill somebody to wake them up? The answer is that the Almighty God looks at humanity as one big family. And this, what we're doing today, in fact, is a beautiful example of that. We are one big family. Family of human being is one big family. In fact, in the ayat, in the signs of the Holy Quran, he addresses us as one entity, not just a family, but one entity. When we are harming others, we are harming ourselves. And when humanity is going in the wrong directions, individuals going in the wrong directions, or collectively we're doing certain things wrong, we are deviating from his laws, and as a result we are harming ourselves. There's a cancer in the body of humanity. Sometimes to wake humanity up, it takes some who would obviously suffer and may even die, and they would be purified. It's not, again, when we look at the hereafter, they will be purified. It'll be a good start for them, a good start of their hereafter, and it will help the rest of humanity to wake up as a human family, to realize his blessings, to wake up from that deep slumber of their ignorance and realize that, we have so many blessings of God. Let us appreciate them by doing the right thing based on what he has set as rules that he has set for us. This, I think, in fact, an example, and I want to finish with this example. An example that I would give is, imagine humanity is a body, and this body now has some cancer, or this body has some bacteria or some diseases, and we have to give it certain medications. The medication could be something like antibacterial or antibiotics, or it could be even chemo. I'm talking about effective chemo, if chemo is effective. We may give that body certain medications or certain remedies or treatments that may cause some cells to die. It may cause some parts of the human body to suffer, but that is all done in order to get rid of or to cure that disease that will help the body thrive. And this is an example of that. That's the Almighty God is waking us up as humanity. And it's a good time, I think, for us to reflect on his blessings, all of the beautiful blessings of God that he has been given us and constantly gives us, and gives us within this pandemic that we still, some of us, in fact, later on, if we get the chance, I'd like to discuss the issue of divorce that is happening, that we lack appreciation when it comes to the human society. Now we have to distance ourselves from others, and within our homes, some humans are going into problems with the only few people or the only individual that they can interact with, and creating issues and wanting to separate or divorce from them. That is a very sad state that some of us, we need to really reflect on that. I want to finish here, and I guess we move to yourself now, Josh.
Thank you, Sheikh. I appreciate that. And it definitely is a multifaceted issue. We are all looking at this through different lenses, and I appreciate you sharing about your tradition. And we do have a few more people who have started watching since we started. And so I just want to take a brief moment to say we are taking turns sharing our perspective from our faith tradition on where is God in the pandemic. And in a little bit, we're going to have a little bit more of a dialogue style interaction. And then towards the end, we're also going to try to leave some room to answer some questions. If you have questions, you can email outreach@masjidalhai.org. So I want to echo what's been said a couple times now, in that I do not speak for my entire faith tradition. I am not the spokesperson for Christianity, and there is actually not a living spokesperson for Christianity. There are so many different branches of the Christian family tree, and certain branches have a tendency to want to excommunicate other branches. So just so we've got that kind of framework to know that this is where I come from in my approach to my Christian faith in terms of this particular season that we're walking through. In terms of the where is God in the pandemic, the pieces that come to me, I struggle with or process through a lot of what's been mentioned. Okay, if God has all this power, then why do these things happen? And okay, I don't believe that God is the cause of every bad thing. I do believe that on some level God has to allow it. Like, if God has all this power, then God could intervene and yield a different outcome. And so that's something I struggle with, and something that I wonder about, and something that is part of my prayer life, really, conversations with God. I think God is big enough to handle our questions, and I can say, God, why is this, I'm not confident you're handling this well, God. I need you to reassure me that this is going to be okay. And so I know that the questions about what is God's will and what is God's plan, those are often questions that we can approach from a position of not being directly engaged with the difficulty of the present moment. I am not sitting here attached to a ventilator. And so the person who is attached to the ventilator, or the person who is by their bedside, or unfortunately in many cases not able to be by their bedside, I think that what that person is looking for is different than the level of theological engagement that we have the margin to consider, right? And so I think that what's helpful for me in the midst of looking at suffering and pain and the things that we go through in human life is to consider, what do I know about God, or what do I believe about God? And I heard some of this already, but mercy and compassion, the not a desire that anyone should suffer, that the things that happen in this world, the things that from our perspective that go wrong, that hurt people and that harm people and that cause loss of life, loss of employment, loss of relationships, I don't think that is God causing that. I think that there's a lot of other factors involved. I think that the scope of our current pandemic, for me, I consider human decisions to play a massive role in where we are now in terms of the spread of the infection. In 2020 hindsight, we could definitely see other decisions that could have been made that could have limited the number of people who were infected, right? So there's human responsibility in that. And whether that's governmental authoritative responsibility, that's a piece of it. Personal responsibility. I know that when all this started, I was like, why are people freaking out? They say it's just the flu. you know? And I've had to say, okay, I was not taking this seriously at the beginning, and I take it more seriously now. So human action has definitely played a role in the suffering of people. And I think that for me, the framework of understanding God in the midst of this that is helpful is one of the names that we use when we talk about Jesus is the term Emmanuel, which means God with us. And so, from a Christian perspective, God is with me. And I know that's not completely unique to Christianity, but it's how I frame my understanding of how to go through this, right? God is with me in the midst of anything I face. And when my strength is insufficient, God offers strength, right? When I don't know how things are going to unfold, I know that God is going to be with me through whatever it is. And so that's the part that I lean into, whereas God in the pandemic, well, God's where God always is. God is with us and is going to get us through it in some way that I don't necessarily get to know what it looks like. And so that's where I've been thinking and pondering as we go through this time together. And of course, all of us could go a lot longer on this topic. And we're going to kind of pivot a little bit here.
You might be interested to know, Pastor, that there are a number of synagogues out there in the world that are called either temple or congregation or something Immanuel, which in Hebrew means God is with us. So accidentally or purposely, you certainly hit on a Jewish concept as well. And before we pivot, just to say in the concept of, God being abundant in mercy, in the Jewish tradition, we're in the midst of our celebration of Passover, which on a regular basis coincides with the celebration of Easter, I know. But this past Shabbat, this past Sabbath, the intermediate Sabbath in the days of Passover, the special reading from the Torah, from the 5 books of Moses that we read, was from the book of Exodus and about the 13 attributes of God, where it says in Hebrew, Adonai, Adonai, El Rachum V'Chanun, that the Lord is merciful and compassionate, 2 different words for God's compassion, not all that dissimilar from the words of the Quran that the Sheikh quoted a few moments ago. So again, a lot that unites us in these moments.
Thank you for that. Yes, and now that we've all shared, Sheikh, would you like to circle back on anything that you've heard?
Oh, good. Putting me on the spot. No problem. Well, one of the comments you made and Rabbi also commented on was that God is with us. And this is one of the most beautiful statements or expressions that we have in a story in the Holy Quran that gave a lot of people hope during this. In fact, there was a message that was circulating on one of the social or some of the social media outlets that gave this story and that message of the story that when many of the prophets of God faced difficulties, the natural things that they would have sought would not have helped. Yet miracles happened and miracles continue to happen. And the example here was the story of Moses, peace be upon him, as he approached the sea and the army is behind him. There was no escape. In the natural means, there's no escape. And his people, and this part of the Quran is very beautiful. His people said to him, "Inna la mudrakun." We are caught. That's it. We're doomed, basically. That was their statement. He said, "No, I have my Lord with me. He will guide me. Inna ma'i Rabbi." This is my Lord is with me, which is a beautiful concept. So God is with us and He will guide us. We need to turn to Him, though. If we are turning away, if we're in the opposite direction, we cannot expect to hear Him or to gain any kind of guidance from him, or for our prayers to be answered if I'm in the opposite direction, if I'm disobeying, if I'm not listening to him, if I'm denying him, or questioning his attributes, his beautiful attributes, then I am not exposing myself to his mercy. But when I turn to him, then he is with me for sure.
I appreciate that story being present in all three of our traditions, actually.
Yeah, we're reading that story actually from the Torah on Tuesday, on the 7th day of Passover, though in sort of classic Jewish form, the way that it appears in the Torah, the Israelites complain a little bit more than express faith. They basically say, why did you take us out of Egypt to die in the desert? And Moses has a statement of faith of God will fight for you in this moment. But it's, exactly
Beautiful.
how I think a lot of us feel.
And that's definitely how it's framed in Christian scripture as well, in our Christian retelling of the Hebrew story. I love that is a story that's present for all of us, and it reminds us, it reminds me that I'm a lot quicker to complain than I am to listen, and I'm also not saying that if people are struggling right now, they should just buck up and not say that it's hard right now. It's okay to name when things are difficult. We're going to pivot for just a few minutes and have just a bit of a conversation, really, about pretty much anything that we've talked about so far. I'm fine with us circling back a little bit in more of a dialogue format, but also, how is this hitting our faith community specifically? And then maybe where do we see ways that we can be there for our larger community as well? And whoever wants to start is welcome to do that.
I'll go. Everybody's fine with that. One of the things that makes this particular social distancing complicated within Jewish tradition, and I suspect it's true in other ways, and I think it's true across religious denominations, is really the prohibition that exists in our world at the moment against gathering people together. And it's something that we've all become wonderfully accustomed to in the concept of prayer, of praying together. And in some faith traditions, you can't even pray on your own. And in Judaism, you certainly can. But there are certain prayers and certain rituals that you can only do when you have 10 Jewish adults gathered together. For example, reading from the Torah are certain prayers. And there has been some question, and some people have said one answer and some people have said another, in classic Jewish form as well, as to whether or not those 10 people who we always just assumed would gather together in person, whether 10 people gathered together on a Zoom call would count as your religious quorum. And that has created, I think, a combination of angst, but also inspiration. People pushing their spiritual boundaries, certainly myself included, I believe. But it's forced a lot of us to reconsider things that we would have otherwise thought of. And I actually was thinking about this before as someone was talking. It's sort of different to talk about theological concepts when you're taking them in the abstract. I think you had mentioned this, Josh, that we are blessed in this moment that none of us is in a hospital room on a ventilator, and thank God, my immediate relatives are not in a hospital room where I can't visit them. So it's a different concept to have a theological conversation without the practical implication on your own family. The same, and I'll only speak for Jewish tradition, as I remember having conversations in rabbinical school about how I would decide a question of Jewish law, only to find that that when the people were actually sitting in front of me asking this question, looking at me and saying, Rabbi, can I do this because my loved one and my child and my spouse and my this and my that, and you're looking at them in their eyes and in their request and in a search for compassion and a search for connection, it's very different to answer those questions in the abstract versus in the practical. And I think that idea has brought forth a new understanding to how we gather together in prayer. If you would have asked me a couple of months ago if I would think that it would be okay for 10 people gathered together on a screen to count as what we call a minyan, which just means a quorum, I would have said no. But then in times of pandemic, in these unusual circumstances, in these emergency circumstances, as it were, I want my congregants to have a chance to gather together in as much the same way as is possible. And I have great respect for people who have had varied answers or answers simply no. But we celebrated 2 Passover Seders that were done on Zoom. One was for our congregation, where at the peak we had 100 screens signed in, somewhere in the vicinity of 220, 240 people probably. And as we said, it was an incredible experience that we hope is going to be once in a lifetime. And that's how we approach these ideas, just from how do we continue to connect with our community.
Excellent.
Oops.
I'm not sure what is happening there.
I think we're in the process of emphasizing that email address. If you have questions, you can.
Yeah.
I'm just guessing. I don't know. So the email address again is outreach@masjidalhai.org. We do have a few questions that are starting to come in. I'll address those in just a minute. But Sheikh, did you want to respond to what?
Yeah, I mean, similar to what Rabbi mentioned, we had these considerations and these thoughts. I'm not speaking for the entire Muslim world. For our school, at least, we have certain restrictions. There are certain prayers that we have to do in congregation. One of them is the Friday prayer that consists of sermons and a specific prayer that has the bowing and the prostration and so on. And it has a special format, and that happens with a minimum of 5 people present. We were blessed enough to be able to do it with those 5 people, media people who are recording me, and a couple of the helpers and so on. But the rest of the community have had to be online watching. Obviously, when it comes to the prayer, they can hear the sermons, but they cannot participate in the prayer, the congregational prayer, as it is. It has to be within a certain distance. So we have not had, and I have not given myself, I cannot give myself that liberty to make a ruling to say if you can hear and see, despite where you are, you can join. But you can certainly listen to the prayer, you can listen to the sermons, and then perform your regular daily prayers, which can be performed individually. It doesn't have to be in congregation. Interestingly, we have in the middle of the lunar month that we're in, Shaban, which comes before the month of Ramadan, which we are coming towards. And I'd like to speak about that briefly, but in the middle of the month of Shaban, we have a very special night, which is the night of the birth of the Savior, the Mahdi, who we believe he will come and he will be joined with Jesus, peace be upon him, and he'll bring justice to this world and so on. And his birth was in the middle of this lunar month that we're in, and on that night we have a very special prayers that we perform, but obviously we had to do it online. We had, I believe, more than 500 people, and later on it was a lot more. At the time we were doing it, there were about probably 200 to 300 people, and by the end of it there were about 500 people who were actually watching the live prayers and participating and so on. That specific prayer does not have to be in a way that you are connected physically. So that definitely we have had to change things and accommodate basically the current circumstances in order to have more people. However, we have the coming to the month of Ramadan, which I believe all of us, we have this, I don't know if you can still see me. I have a problem here, technical issue, but okay. In the month of Ramadan, we have obviously the prayers and so on, which we performed, congregational prayers, recitations. A lot of this can happen in terms of instead of doing it in congregation, you can do it in as an individual prayer recitation. You can join in. However, there's one aspect that as humans we all do and love doing together, which is eating together. And in the month of Ramadan, it's the breaking of the fast, which we do together. It's an amazing time, and that cannot obviously happen on these virtual, through these virtual means. So this is something we definitely will miss, and we will have, I don't know how much of the month we will have to be in the same situation that we're in. It starts in about a week or so, and I don't think we will be out of the current situations and situation and the restrictions that we have currently. So it is something definitely the Muslim world by and large will miss, and I guess time for us to reflect. We ate a lot during these feasts while there were some poor who were suffering and did not have food. Maybe we need to reassess what we do in these during these feasts. We should eat together. It's a blessed time to eat together, but do we have to have all the food that we make, and where a lot of it goes to waste, where there are some other people in the world that are not blessed? They don't have that opportunity to have the food. That's their trial and our trial. And again, I want to come back, if you allow me, to the one of the points that whether we like it or not, we have to face it. There is a suffering that is happening, and this suffering is definitely allowed by God. He has full control. He's the omnipotent. We have no doubt. All of us, I believe, we believe in this attribute that he has power over all things. There's no limit to his power. Therefore, if he wants to stop it, he could stop it. Therefore, he is allowing it. Why? As I said, in the formative level of the creation, he set the world in a certain way, and there's consequences for certain actions. So there are definitely consequences for our actions. And the Quran says every harm that happens, every bad thing that happens in the universe or in our world, including in the oceans, it happens through our actions. Bima kasabat aydin nas, through what people have earned, their actions and their obviously misconduct and so on. So we definitely play a role in how some of these things happen, but his mercy is not out of the equation. That is what I want to emphasize on, that despite the fact that we have a role in it, he is still with us, with every one of us, guiding us through it, helping us, and even those who are suffering. And I agree with you, it is difficult to speak on their behalf, sitting there. And I try to imagine that. And every time I have a conversation with my wife on many aspects, I say to her, can we imagine ourselves with a ventilator in the hospital? It's not an easy thing. Or, being in a position where we cannot see our loved ones and so on. It is not an easy thing. But I put myself in that position, and we need to strengthen our faith, because tests will come to us. Everyone's test is relative to their ability. So if a test comes my way, and if it's a tough test, I don't want to lose my faith. I want to know what it is, and I want to have that answer, that question answered. And to me, it is beautiful. From him, everything is beautiful. If I'm suffering, he's purifying me, he's strengthening me, and I'm going to be reborn. I'm going to have another start, which is totally different, and it'll be a beautiful start with what I'm going through. I'm going to be closer to him. I don't want us to lose hope and lose faith, given the difficulties of the situation.
Thank you, Sheikh. There's a few questions that have come in that I'd like for us to address. And again, we are going to wrap up by 8, so we just want to
You have to
touch
be
base
somewhere,
on
John?
this. Yeah, I got to go like in the other room. It's a long commute. So one of the questions that I think is helpful, and maybe we can share from the perspective of our respective faith communities, is the economic fallout of our current situation is definitely massive, right? And so many people are losing their jobs or don't have their basic necessities. What's going on in your community, maybe your faith community or your general community, that you feel like is people doing good work right now? And if you want to plug an organization or a way that people can connect, you're welcome to do that.
I keep going first. I'll defer this time.
Okay.
No, actually, I went first because I talked.
Okay. So you want me to? Well, just on the economic loss, it's another reflection to have, and I think I'm taking advantage of the situation to reflect on many things that our society needs to reflect on. What is necessary versus what we what we think we need, and the things that we try to achieve or obtain in life and compete over. This is a time to reflect on that, because oftentimes we think that there are so many things that we need, and therefore we neglect our time for ourselves, our connection with God, our time for the family. Both husband and wife have to work hard and neglect the children, also that we can achieve a certain lifestyle that we think it's a necessity. But now we're having to deal or make do with a lot less. We realize that the most significant thing is to have that bread, in the end of the day, and to survive and have that family time and so on. And so it's good to reflect when we are suffering through, loss of financial, perhaps strength, or any kind of financial losses should be reflected on as, again, it is a test, and also a time to reflect on what we really need and how much we could share. And thankfully, our community has been very helpful. We have people who have been collecting food and trying to help those who do not have, and so on. But I think we can do a lot more. I believe we can definitely do a lot more.
Okay. I'll go next. How about that? Look at that. Ha. Yeah.
Sure.
So I see, so the Community Hope Center works with folks who are experiencing poverty and homelessness. And so we were already dealing with and serving folks who were in a space of economic need. And what we've seen is just a skyrocketing demand. Anyone who is kind of making it before now is not making it right now. And so we've moved into a space of, or we've adjusted how we deliver services, and we work on really basic needs like food on your table, when typically our services focus more on how to be more self-sufficient. But right now, we can't tell people, hey, let us help you work on a resume to help you get a job or a better paying job, because a lot of those aren't there right now. So that's definitely just making sure people get fed is a day-to-day thing. That's been a very eye-opening thing for me, not coming from a place of experiencing that kind of economic need in my own life, but seeing that this is reality for so many folks, and it's reality for a lot more folks right now. And so the additional challenge there is with germ transmission, like we can't do things exactly the way that we've done them before in terms of helping people in need. And so it's definitely a challenge for us as an agency. And I'm grateful for my boss, Mary Downey, who really helps us to flex and figure out new ways of doing things. But I see people stepping up, and that's inspiring to me, and just trying to help however we can.
So a couple of different answers. In seeing the growing economic need, it certainly puts into perspective the impossible choice, and maybe it's not impossible, but the challenge of balancing, people being alive without dying of pandemic or plague, but what do people need in terms of basic necessities to also stay alive? I think that's a real question that deserves proper conversation. The second thing for me is in terms of how to continue to connect with people. It's not true in all Jewish communities, but one of the ways that people express their connection to a synagogue is by becoming a member of a synagogue and contributing to it. And I think it's important for all synagogues, and I can't imagine that any house of worship wouldn't act this way. But people who gave on a certain level in the past are likely not able to do so. And our kindness and compassion and outreach and treating them in exactly the same way that we would treat all of the people who participate in whatever way in our congregation or don't, remains the same. But the third thing I think is also, and I'll only speak for myself, but working for a non-for-profit organization and a religious non-for-profit organization, my own livelihood is dependent on people having disposable income that they then choose out of the generosity of their hearts and minds and spirits to donate to the house of worship, which then provides me with my own sustenance and my own livelihood, for which I can help to support my own family. And so seeing other people and knowing that other people are suffering in this economic way makes it a very stark reality, that it's only a couple of steps, if maybe even a couple. It might just be one step before the idea of not being able to provide for my own family because I'm reliant on people having the ability to support the work that I do. And, that's true for people who work in non-for-profits, and it's true for people who work in for-profits because people need to have money to buy items, people who work in retail whose stores are not open. I mean, it's a short step between that. It's just the retail of spirituality and religion as opposed to the retail of other things. And so I see that and I understand it. And, every day that I'm able to be a part of the economic world is one that I'm grateful for. But it's a scary thing on all levels.
Yeah, and I think that that's the fear piece is definitely true for a lot of people right now. And we're coming to the 8 p.m. moment. And so I just want us to close with one, if people want to follow up with your organization, if you would share maybe the website or something like that. And then if there's just a closing word on something you'd like to say as we sign off. And because I just sprung that on you, I'll go first. Look, I can go first. So I just want to say to anyone who's watching this that I really hope you know that you're not alone, and that there are people represented by our respective faith communities who want to be there for you however we can. And as we are all in our different traditions reaching for God and looking for God in the midst of this, I think we've all said that God is accessible and that we have the opportunity to connect with God even though it looks different. And it's not the way that we prefer right now. But if you want to follow up with the Community Hope Center, the website is www.hope192.com. That's hope192.com. And so we would love to connect with you more.
Yeah.
Good ending.
Working from home.
We all respect.
It's God there too. That was my son's YouTube debut, I believe. One of the things that I have heard in this conversation, and I think about a lot, is, questioning of God and how could this be? And I appreciate the fact that our different faith traditions look at that concept differently. Is it a test? Is it an opportunity for questioning? I always think about the fact that even a questioning conversation or an angry relationship with God for allowing something like this to happen is still a relationship with God. And it's, at least for me, better to be angry or to be frustrated or to question than to, wipe away any concept of dialogue or relationship with the divine. But I think it's also important, and this is not to try to make anyone feel better, because I don't think that's possible, but I think in moments like this, when we see this kind of death and destruction, and I remember when Hurricane Irma came through Florida, we were still living in Orlando at the time, and the other devastating hurricanes that have struck other places, it's easy to look at those moments and say, why did God allow this to happen? And forget all of the times when a hurricane looked like it was about to come and then ended up taking a different course and went back out to sea, or the possibility that there were other pandemics that have existed in the past that, through God's influence in some way, did not become something that was so devastating to our entire world on a physical and economic and all kinds of levels. It doesn't make this moment better, and it doesn't rob us of our opportunity to be emotional and to be distressed and to be upset and to be angry and to feel tested, if that's the way that we perceive it in our religion. But it's also an opportunity to think back on all the times when we thought things were going to be bad and then they weren't. And that's a way that I look to find strength and to find continued connection. If you have further questions, you can visit the synagogue's website where I work at congregationtiferethisrael.org. There are many synagogues. If you are local to Florida, I would encourage you to visit the website of the Southwest Orlando Jewish Congregation, which is sojc.org, located in Lake Buena Vista. Wonderful congregation with an excellent rabbi there, though I hope you'll keep communicating with me on these Zooms, though Rabbi Kreblet is wonderful. And happy to be a resource to anyone who wants that kind of guidance.
Thank you. And I know time is very short, so I'll be very brief on the note of these difficulties and the trial that it is, and the relationship we should have with him. It's beautiful to always maintain that relationship, and I love that point that we have difficulties that we always go through, and we overcome, and we don't remember them. In fact, there are so many diseases running in our body that the immune system is fighting for us. We don't even realize that. And it's only at times that we do get sick or something does happen that we start questioning. Rather, we should turn to him. And that's my brief message in the end. Let us all turn to him. Let us all recognize his blessings, recognize his mercy, and know that he is answering. He answers the prayers of those who call upon him. Let us all turn to him and be sincere, be humble in our request and beseeching him, and ask him to remove the problems and difficulties from his people. He does answer prayers to remove this dark cloud from humanity, and through it to teach us and to help us learn the lessons he wants us to learn, to get closer to him through his mercy. That is my last word. Thank you very much. Thank you, both of you, and all the listeners.
Well, again, we'd like to thank our panelists. So wherever you are, we do expect that you're clapping right now. But thank you all so much. It's really good to see you again. A big thank you to Minaz for helping with this, and the other folks at Masjid Al-High. We wouldn't have been able to put this on without them, their work behind the scenes. So we appreciate you so much. We hope that you're safe. We hope that you stay healthy as possible. And if you want to reach out to any of us, you can, of course, do that through the resources that we've mentioned. Have a good evening, and really good to be with you tonight.
Now we can wait.